pandemic, but I haven't used this one as well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Looks like we've gone live. Great. So welcome everybody back from the break. It's great to see you all again. Nice to have our next panel coming up about space training. Before I get started, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Erin Bonilla. I'm the Vice President of Training Programs for Star Harbor Space Training Academy. I am also an analog astronaut myself, and I've participated in analogs like microgravity flights, Project PoSSUM, Sensoria, and then on the topic of some of the analogs that Scott was talking about earlier, and Uli, I also supported an Everest Base Camp expedition and learned how to run those types of expeditions. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so excited that this is happening and that the community can come together. So we'll just jump right in. So space training has been, oh, there we go. Yay, we have a full panel. Thanks for joining. This is great. So space training typically has been very difficult to access, like those types of activities, unless you were seeking them out yourself, like really trying to find them in different ways to get an equivalent version or a space analog version of that. And now with some of the new opportunities that you're going to hear about, and with the commercial space industry changing, there's going to be a lot more chances for people, whoever wants to get access to these types of activities, to get it. So we'll jump right in. We'll go around the group, and everyone, go ahead and introduce yourself. And then we'll follow that up with talking about each one of your individual programs. So I think it'll be a really exciting way to get started. So we'll get started with Anika. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Anika Mehlis, and I'm from Germany. I really enjoyed the conference so far, and I'm really honored to be in this panel and to take part in all of this. Yeah, I'm an analog astronaut with the Austrian Space Forum in Austria, as the name suggests. And my background is actually in microbiology, and I also have a master's degree in engineering. And right now I'm doing my PhD in public health, and I'm also working as a research assistant and lecturer. I'm doing some other things on the side. And one of my passions, so to say, is to talk to young people about technology, science, space. I have 3 little daughters myself, and I really think that we need more women in STEM and in science. So I'm involved in several projects regarding that matter as well. Yeah, and I think that's it for now, and I'm giving the mic to the next person.
Great. Why don't we jump to Kalle?
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Erin and Jazz and Sian and everyone else to arrange this. Like, this is great stuff. As you said, like the access for this kind of awareness generally, what is like, what can you do, space experiences, and not just be a spectator. That's very important. I'm the captain and co-founder, Kalle Vaha-Jaakkolo of Space Nation. And my background, farmer's boy, and I actually I'm here in Finland at my parents' place, like now during the pandemic time, and waiting to get back to the Los Angeles where I normally am. And I don't know where my space in enthusiasm started, but as long as my recollection goes, it was something natural for me, very that we are going to the space. And eventually it drew me into studying physics. Then I was a bit in the military, educator, and eventually entrepreneur and co-founder of Space Nation. My interest in space becomes kind of the unifying aspects of that, which I very much goes to my roots as growing up in rural areas and then later in cities, and meeting diverse people and around the world and traveling a lot. So there's the aspect how through space we actually can like create not just awareness and expand our minds and lift our consciousness, but actually like create lasting and sustaining change in our behaviors and the human aspects of space, so to speak, and humanity's expansion to space. That's my biggest interest. Thank you.
That's awesome. And next we'll bring on Jason.
Hi, thanks, Erin. My name is Jason Reimuller, and I'm the founder and executive director of the International Institute for Astronautical Sciences. And my background is probably similar to many here, just being inspired by astronauts. And that's my background has been in human spaceflight system engineering and aeronomy and flight test engineering and flying, anything to do to explore and help enable the field of astronautics. We started the Institute back in 2012 as an extension of a research program that's active. It's called Project PoSSUM, and that's our suborbital and upper atmosphere research education. IIAS, the Astronautics Institute, we have members now from 46 different countries, and we have research concentrations in aeronomy and bioastronautics and spacesuit evaluation and science communication and flight test engineering and spaceflight operations. There's something incredibly powerful about the persona of the astronaut to inspire and to get people engaged in science and STEM, and that's fundamentally what we're about, is getting people, training people, preparing people to make meaningful contributions in science that enable this new industry that we're setting off in astronautics. So some of this is redefining the way people think about science. Some of it's the way redefining the way people have access to education. And then representation plays a very strong role in our programs too. We have 3 outreach programs. PoSSUM 13 serves to represent more young women to get involved in STEM. Out Astronaut serves the LGBTQ community. And we have Space for All Nations, that ties together, represents people that are trying to harness this inspirational power of astronautics to drive STEM in emerging space nations.
Awesome. It sounds like you have your hands full over there. There's a lot of great things going on. Yeah. And next we'll go to JJ.
Hello all, I'm Dr. Tayden Hastings. Most of you know me as JJ. So good to see so many of my friends in the audience here today virtually. So good to be reunited with my former crewmates, Cyan and Erin. I am the director of the Sensoria program. Some of you may have been following us for the past year through our first 3 missions at high seas. Our aim is to actually, in practice, make space available and accessible to everyone. So at the core of that is around what Jason was talking about, representation. But for me, as a scientist, that includes representation in data and embodied knowledge. And so we can talk about that in terms of training, not just future astronauts, but also training researchers on how to access space, how to utilize analogs, how to utilize analog facilities, both for space simulations, but also microgravity, parabolics, and coming up, launch capabilities. So I'm here to talk about how to take missions into program level thinking. And my background, I like to call myself an extremophile. I go out into extreme environments as a biologist, as well as an artist. I'm both professionally. So I go off to places like Antarctica every year to study the microenvironment, the microflora that's there, and to experience the isolation and try and translate that back into experiences for all of us.
Thanks, JJ. And then we'll go on to Agata. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for invitation, and it's an honor to be here among such great people making space closer to all of us. And we too, from Poland, we are former European Space Agency workers. We decided to develop our own company, which is an incubator for space businesses and space new projects. And our analog astronaut training center is a sort of incubation center for different types of projects. We have several already ongoing technological development projects. So we start with high school students, high school pupils. Then we go through students, of course, from various countries. And we realized with the master engineering and even doctoral thesis, so we already will have the second PhD made out of our work inside the habitat. And yeah, and we realized that we started everything in 2016, and now we see that Many of our ideas, they came out into small startups, and now they are continuing and growing, hopefully successfully, to make this space accessible for everyone. So we develop toilets, we develop new farms, space farms, CO2 systems to create a good, healthy atmosphere, etc., etc. So these are all our small businesses that we develop.
Wonderful. Why don't we go right into, since we have you on here, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Analog Astronaut Training Center, and then how that relates to space training? Like, how do you support the industry? How are you preparing, like offering opportunities for people to go through space training activities?
So we are focused on permanent contracts with several aerospace engineering schools, and we are on a good way. Actually, in the habitat, we have students from Dublin University, from Ireland, and next week we are going to have students from IPSA, from Great Britain, from London College. So we try to make these permanent contracts with these kind of universities, academia, and to train these people to realize projects which are long-term projects, not only one mission, but it is like 2-3 years of projects, continuing projects, and comparing one mission to another mission, making several master theses and PhD studies on it. So this is one pathway that we are following, and the second pathway is purely business pathway. So some of our students, they are interested in developing their companies, their startups, and we help them to do this. We also invite them because we have several grants. We are also involved in several businesses, so we are searching among these students that we have here who is good enough and who is passionate enough to join us and to start a real job. Yeah,
that's excellent. I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration in this group after hearing what you guys are doing and how you're supporting getting people.
We already collaborate.
Oh, fantastic. That's great to hear. Yeah. Why don't we jump to Jason? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about PoSSUM and how it's preparing people or offering opportunities in space training?
Well, fundamentally, we look at providing privately funded citizen science research in addition to traditional public fund channels. So when we talk about training, we're not really a training organization. You know, we're finding novel ways to do research that is enabling this community, this industry of ours. So when we talk about training, we're trying to find ways to engage teams to do some of the research we do on our microgravity campaigns, evaluating spacesuits and in gravity offset. So each of these different kinds of campaigns, not only do you have to do real-time prioritization of your research. For example, when we do a microgravity campaign, we have one of our members in a spacesuit. You know, that's intrinsically risky. When you're in zero-G or changing G environments, every single person on that flight has a safety critical role. In addition, there's usually 20-some experiments, from secondary experiments to education and outreach experiments, some extending from our programs. And we have to teach and train everyone to be able to understand everything, to prioritize flight safety, crew member safety, and then prioritize these. So if somebody gets sick in the flight or somebody's experiment doesn't work, you can make these decisions quickly. And this model we extend not only from our microgravity campaigns and our gravity offset campaigns. We have NBL research, we do egress testing, IVA spacesuit evaluation. All of these takes the same kind of preparation and training, and we build it up from kind of fundamentals. How do you take somebody, and somebody could be, you know, a 19-year-old PoSSUM Academy graduate and integrating with subject matter experts. And that's what's great about having kind of this matrixed approach, is that we can take people that have more limited life experiences and figure out how quickly can we get this person up so that they can accomplish their mission in a successful team.
That's great. Why don't we jump to Kalle? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Space Nation and what your offerings are?
Sure, and that was a good point that Jason said, like about that the PoSSUM isn't like necessarily like a space training, that isn't the major thing. It's kind of similar with us, that we're always thinking that training is a little bit daunting for especially the target groups that we have in mind. That we are seeking more about like kind of a broader audiences that are space curious, let's say, and spectators, but like want to find a way in, and aren't for those yet like the hardcore users for like ready to go to analog, for example. So we want to create like pathways that you can small steps come into the space scene, be part of that, not just be dazzled about that, and eventually hopefully end up into analogs and all the way to space through our experiences, but also like through partner experiences and people on this panel and their efforts. So taking one step back from that, as I said, kind of like the universal citizenship that we aim with our programs to evolve all humans to take that leap and thriving universal citizens on Earth, the Moon, Mars, and beyond, and offering these space missions, quests, and other experiences that expand your mind together with people around the world, diverse people with new insights, perspectives, with experts like astronauts and other human progress pioneers, and that you can together explore new frontiers. And in our kind of a universal citizen program, we usually talk about three different kind of skills that we want to emphasize. There's personal skills, which are like teamwork, communications. Everyone can like when they learn those abilities and get better, it helps in anything that you do, basically. Then there are space skills specific that you learn about, like space craft design or mission design or living in space and so forth. And the third is mindset skills, which is perhaps the most important ultimately, that how do we not just expand our awarenesses, are evolved in the subject matter and bring like new people into that, and train our explorer mindset, as we often talk, which is kind of a growth mindset combined with the attitude of explorer. So you need to really get your hands dirty, or whether you go to Antarctica or other places and experiment alone and together, go to the uncomfortable things and uncertainty to evolve. And we have spaceport.spacenation.org, which is our community for these universal citizens that is pretty new now, and during the pandemic we started. And we actually today launched a new virtual quest to save the ISS, which is exciting, this online experience where you can first self-paced jump into a mission scenario in a spacewalk or EVA astronaut training, which suddenly becomes a rescue mission to save the ISS. And the following part is a group call, which is kind of a virtual escape room experience where you have the dynamics of a mission control, ground control, and people in space. And we are pretty excited about that, so that you can also check at the spaceport.spacenation.org. And these are kind of our own experiences that now during the pandemic time we've started to develop, and more on the online side. And after the pandemic like gets kind of like at a better handled, we'll get back to our expeditions, on-site physical expeditions and missions. And then there's also like these third-party partnerships and collaborations that we are all the time seeking, and we already have like partners that enable to create that journey, that you take that small step, whether it is the quest or join the community online, and eventually taking these missions or expeditions, on-site physical ones, and eventually taking zero-G flights and even to travel to space. So kind of a live it by doing it with small steps and getting like perhaps the not the most hardcore people, but like outside new people into the space realm, and eventually finding the services that all the different ventures and organizations on this panel and otherwise offer, that kind of becoming a certain way inspiration or attraction gateway for new space curious people to participate.
Oh, that's great. You brought up a really good point about adapting during the pandemic and the online course offerings. I'd like to come back to that. We'll give the rest of our panelists a chance to talk about their programs, but I think that's a really important one to talk about. So JJ, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Sensoria program?
Sure. Well, we were very excited to be able to, during the pandemic, still be able to carry out with our partner at High Seas, Dr. Musilova. Hello, Dr. M2. Very proud to be able to work with them last year on 3 incredible missions, the first of which Erin and I were on in January 2020, just before the pandemic. And then it was an incredible opportunity to really try to think through how to be resilient and operate within even further resource constraints and logistical constraints during the pandemic with High Seas. How do you navigate the security, safety of your crew when the world outside is just as dangerous in certain cases as the simulated world that you're meant to be entering into? And it really incited some rather interesting conversations around the logistics of getting crews into space under these conditions as well. So the Sensoria program is meant to be the sort of next level for those of you that might have already been on a mission at MDRS or High Seas or Lunaris or DMARS or any of our other wonderful facilities around the world. We're meant to create another layer of experience to be able to help you develop professionally within the space sector, especially as we're entering an era of enhanced commercial activity, to be able to connect you to other incredible space researchers, those who are professions within the field, and those who have set this industry up for success through our national programs at NASA, ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos. So now we are able to offer even more exciting opportunities through some of our new connections and relationships with our colleagues at NASA HRP, SMD, and even our new commercial space providers, as I'm sure some of you are connected. So we are now able to tap you into those research opportunities as well to help you interface and carry out research at a program level, not just a single mission, as some of our panelists in the earlier panels have addressed. It's very difficult to learn how to bring in a research project or a demo into a mission and be able to get something to work successfully so that you get the output that you're looking for. That takes a lot of work. We are here to help you devise your plan, to help you develop a plan for testing and demoing your research, not just in a single mission, but thinking beyond in multiple missions. So we will be continuing to work with our analog facilities across the globe, as well as offering further opportunities for simulation and other platforms.
That's great. So then, Anika, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the Austrian Space Forum and space training opportunities or research opportunities there?
Yeah, sure. You might have heard Karen in one of the former panels. She talked about how the OeWF does a mission for about 4 weeks every 2 to 3 years. So the Austrian Space Forum is one of the leading institutions conducting Mars analog missions. They had their last mission in 2018 in the Omani Desert. And our current mission was supposed to take place last year in the Negev Desert in Israel, and had to be postponed due to Corona, but it will take part this year in October. What's special about our missions, there are several things that we try to develop. First, there's a spacesuit simulator that we use for our EVAs, which is a highly developed kind of spacesuit to a space ship to wear. It's not like only a suit and or an overall and a helmet. It's a really high-tech machine, and it's heavy as well. It weighs up to 50 kilogram. And then we also try to have high fidelity. For example, there's time delay for communication between the base and the mission support center, which is in Innsbruck. And we try to develop kind of workflows and really use all the lessons learned from the previous missions to develop more and more of an exploration cascade. For example, if you go to Mars to look for traces of life, that you use satellite data first, then you go on and use rover data or drone data, and then in the end you send out your astronauts to take geological samples, for example. And to go into the training part a little bit, the training kind of starts with the selection because the analog astronauts have to be highly trained. It's not like you can go on a mission without training. So the selection takes place every few years for a new class of analog astronauts. And the selection process is already pretty rigorous. You can imagine it's like an astronaut selection where you look for medical fitness, psychological fitness, team and communication skills, stuff like that, in addition to the academic and background things. And then there's basic training, which takes about 5 months. I did this training in 2019. And this involves next to stuff like geological training, geology, survival training in the wilderness, quad bike training, the suit, especially we have to know all the electricity and everything. And then there's a lot of safety issues that we have to take into account. So we have first aid training and fire extinguishing training, stuff like that. So you can imagine it's pretty, all encompassing kind of. And then there's mission specific training because we have about 20 experiments for, or between 15 and 20 experiments for every mission from universities all over the world. And I just saw one of the PIs in the chat. So hi, Reut. So to be able to process and do all those experiments, so the universities and researchers get the results out of that. As JJ just said, they have to be performed well, and the flight planning has to be on point. So the team really has to work together. So there's not only the analog astronaut training, but also analog mission basic and advanced training for the people that work in the mission support center and in the overall team. Yeah.
Wow, that's excellent. That's quite an extensive training program leading up to your missions. I'm going to open up these next questions to everyone, whoever wants to respond. So we're not just we don't keep going around the loop. But the first question I wanted to ask was, what difficulties do you face in developing these courses and training programs, and what ways do you think they can be improved? Like, how could we support each other in the community?
I could probably start to that. That's a hard question to answer because everything is so boutique. When we deal with something, sometimes it's the first time things have been done. So it's not only what's our science objectives? Everything that we do, we look at finding ways to enable new, novel, publishable, peer-reviewed science. So when we look at a campaign and we do it from a citizen science perspective, we have to look at this in terms of professional science that we could publish, what kind of technologies are maturing, and how can we best optimize the opportunity in terms of education and outreach. So it's a little bit different approach than typically in education or typically in science. We have to put this all together so that all of our members have a full opportunity to take a high-level accreditable course, at the same time an opportunity to be a co-I or even a PI. And so I think that's, as a Citizen Science Institute, one of the distinct advantages. We can take someone that comes in, again, at a young age and create an opportunity where they can be a PI and publish their own investigation, which is quite rare in a traditional educational institute. So there's a unique opportunity there. But when we look at things, there's an intrinsic risk to things, and we have to make sure that we mitigate that as close as we can to near zero. And we do noctilucent cloud work. We're up at unpressurized planes. With the Canadian Air Force, we go up at 50,000 feet. When we use our own plane, it's 25,000 feet. You're interdependent. You're responsible for each other's safety. And so this is not just something you can train something quickly on the fly, but we want to do it expediently to give the right background as quick as possible to participate in these. So when you look at challenges, a lot of times it's identifying the unknown unknowns. We had to come up with a 30-page document about risk mitigations for vomiting in the suit and microgravity. That hasn't been done before. And then there's the uniqueness. I think this has been brought up before about the internationalism of the program. That's an incredible strength because it sparks creativity, and space provides an incredible bridge. But at the same time, we're looking at different cultural differences. For example, we had a Sikh, a traditional Sikh, and how do you safely put somebody in a spacesuit in a pressure chamber, with a traditional headband? These are things that haven't really been looked at, but that we're finding more and more as we're becoming more international, multicultural, and that becomes our strength. At the same time, it creates opportunities to understand perspectives of crew communication and crew research management from a slightly different perspective. So what are the challenges? It's ongoing. It's boutique. Every time we do a new campaign, we're looking at this kind of the traditional NASA crawl, walk, run methodology. We do it the simplest way possible, and then we try to refine it the second time, and then we take incremental steps. And we do courses like microgravity, or with the Canadian Space Agency at the gravity offset. We try to partner with people that are experts in that to make sure that each step is incrementally successful.
That's great. Would anyone else like to tackle that question? Do you face any challenges when developing your courses or analog training opportunities? And do you know any ways we could collaborate better with each other?
Yes, I could add something. For example, in our trainings, we miss equipment, and usually we need to make prototypes. For example, random positioning machines, for example, water purification systems, gas purification systems, for example, underwater facilities to run some underwater EVAs in neutral buoyancy. Everything we must do. We cannot buy it anywhere on the market. So it takes time, and we need specialists, experts, and this is so unique what we want to do that there is a limited number of people who can do this. For example, now we are realizing pressurized spacesuits for our astronauts, and we are collaborating with America in order to get this kind of equipment, because we have no experts in Poland. So it is kind of international, very complex work, very, expensive work also, because it is not made in Poland where we have everything on site, yes? So we face with these kind of problems, especially now when we want to build a habitat in the stratosphere. We just got a grant, but still it is not enough. It is like 10% of what we need in order to make a safe habitat in the stratosphere. And we have no expert. No one has been building the habitat in the stratosphere. So it is extremely, extremely hard to make it. Space is far more easier, I can tell you, than stratosphere.
Yeah, I could add perhaps like a different kind of a perspective also, that I totally get like what Jason and you were saying about these very like kind of a mundane things that need to be done. Like, for example, exactly like spacesuits. We remember like a couple of years back, like that, how do you get like a spacesuit that fit your purpose and everything? So ultimately we tailor-made them, and you can imagine that that's not the cheapest way to do them. So like there needs to be like on how you scale and these kind of things. So that's always a little bit difficult. But the other kind of a perspective, what we kind of see and where certain focus is like that, how do you do the simulation and scenarios in a way that ultimately enable like those, you cannot manufacture straight, but enable peak experiences, insights happening basically, and self-discovery for the customers and the crew members eventually. That not just are like in a moment, like something memorable moments, that of course you need an engaging and immersiveness and that sort of stuff. But how does that also translate into lasting changes, traits, behavior, habits, and so forth? So ultimately creating that whether you call it training experience or space experience, and I think like the way how to like kind of like find a solution or where you can start always is like Occam's razor, basically, that you put a diverse group of people together and international, put them do something new together and or build something, so they face kind of a like uncertainty, uncomfortableness like together, and they need to overcome themselves and everything. So that way you basically is an easy way, that it's a natural way that they will develop themselves and everything. But it when you go deeper from that, it has a lot of psychology and everything, and the complexity comes, like Jason said, about like cultural differences. So each of us has our personal kind of interpretation of everything. Then we have our cultural backgrounds, societal backgrounds, and when you put people around the world together, how do you create experiences that enables as many as possible in the same experience to eventually have those self-discoveries and peak experiences? And of course, like in analogs and when you go, like you can a lot do that, like put them in the survival things or like dehydration, little sleep and everything. So it'll pushes to the fringes of everyone, and you are kind of compelled to grow in that way. But that's kind of where we find like the boundaries and try to push that. How do you narrate, create the scenario storylines, and much of it is like devil is in the details, I would say.
Wonderful. Anyone else? JJ, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I was going to add to this. One of the challenges of the pandemic has been this lack of direct contact and lack of direct experience. What, programs like PoSSUM and facilities like Lunaris and programs like the Austrian Forum provide are direct embodied experience. We're practicing physically within the constraints. Even if they're not the real spacesuit, they're still spacesuits that simulate that fatigue and the loss of dexterity and the confinement that you experience with them. So they're analogous to enough of a degree that you can experience for a moment, suspend that reality for a moment and experience psychologically, interpersonally, and within a space that suspends your disbelief for long enough that you can practice and come to grips with what you can experience or would expect to experience when you go into space or into another extreme environment. I guess this is why I would say, to Agata's point, we've got to figure out how to bootstrap a bit better, right? We can't always get access to the latest EVA suit. We can't always get access to the latest tools that are being flown to the ISS. So how do we bootstrap just what we need to practice one step of that spectrum that gets us into space and on the surface of the moon or at, whatever location we're going to? How can we figure out together as a community, as specific missions, as a program, how to bootstrap specific solutions to very specific challenges together? So, say Agata has a specific need, she can throw it out to the community and say, hey, we're really needing something to address this specific problem. Anyone know how to do neutral buoyancy on a shoestring, or have any ideas for those of you that are expert divers? Learning how to actually leverage each other's expertise a bit better, I think would help us all. So some forums like this community are really the core asset that we have, because the space sector is so new, right? We have the national programs that have taken us up to space only a handful of times, really. But now we've got a whole new avenue of people self-funding to get to space, or buying each other rides, or buying each other space on parabolics, or even launches. So we're still so new. We are the ones that are setting that trend. We are the pioneers. So we may not yet be wearing the same suits that the Apollo flyers did, but we can build them. It's us. We're the ones.
I think that's very well said.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You saw me nodding enthusiastically because I would like to totally second everything that everybody just said. And looking at a team, a single team, and also at the whole community. I think that people come from all over the world and from all different kind of backgrounds. And the challenge, or one of the challenges, is in training that you use their several or separate abilities, but also you get them all up to one point where they can perform all their tasks that they have to do, and also to think of things that might not be the ones that come to mind first, for example, team and team cohesion or physical training, but also, for example, law training or media training. That are things that analog astronauts and also astronauts will need profoundly in the future, which might not have been such a big part in the past. And that not all people bring to the table in the beginning. So that has to be part of the training as well. And as you just said, I think that networking and helping each other out and sharing knowledge and experiences is going to be the most important thing to make it all happen. And that's actually what brought me to the whole thing and what I like most, that you get to know so many great people and to do so many nice things and network a lot, kind of.
That's great. It's so awesome that this community is coming together in this way. And I know people have been communicating with each other in different ways, but to finally have a place where we can all, connect and be supporting each other internationally to help make these missions possible, or at least achieve, that next level that we're trying to reach. So I'll just remind people. Oh, go ahead.
If I can advise, it is very easy to perform analog missions during COVID times. It is simply you write invitation letter for research, and you need to title the research, and it is so easy to go through the borders, just make your PCR test. And there is absolutely not a problem to stay in the habitat. We already did in COVID times more than 10 analog simulations. And we are all the time working fully without any COVID problems at all. So only if you know how to write it and to write the proper papers on the border, absolutely you have no problem, no limits.
Great. And I'm sure the community can all support each other if you don't know how to write those. You can get help.
Yeah, I can send what we do, and they have no problems with borders. Yes.
Wonderful. That's a really good point. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, and I would just add to the topic before we move on. This year has been such unprecedented, and the things that I see are so that we have seen as in such need is a need for tight community and a need for the intention and purpose. I mean, both of those things have been challenged by a lot of people this year, and something we've very much tried to focus on is how do you keep this community when it's more virtual. Our in-person courses and campaigns and have been snowballing forward. So as soon as we can, we're going to hold these. But how can we as a program offer more online preparatory education, but not just what can we provide to our members? How do we create an opportunity for our members to serve a greater community? So service is fundamental to everything we do. So when we create programs like PoSSUM 13, when we create programs like Out Astronaut and Space for All Nations and reach out to schools and universities, we're creating opportunities for us to be inspirations and keep people focused and excited, because sometimes the best way to deal with our own challenges during the pandemic is to serve others and help others, and in turn that always ends up helping ourselves. So I think focusing on being a service-based organization, and we've done this from the start as a nonprofit, it's like how do we let this grow and how do we keep people engaged and occupied?
Yeah, I can second what Jason said, and a little bit what JJ said and others on earlier, that kind of it's not so much about to have the latest gadgets and all high tech and high definition things. It like service ultimately is creating an experience, and it comes very details and stories and narratives. There's a lot of that you create that immersiveness and people can get. Of course, it depends what you are aiming. If you need to do research and you need to be physically somewhere, you cannot all that, but maybe you can create some kind of a virtual experiences related to that kind of a prepare for that or add to that or supplementary to that. It's real that when you put like that spacesuit on, and it doesn't need to be like even pressurized, but if it's a proper real one that you feel like you're detached from the whole world, and that's a very, very unique experience that you feel. But when it comes to space training or these astronaut-like experiences and everything, you can create them in multiple ways. So for the quest, not to too much like talk about that, but for example, there the mission control play that happens on a group call. It's been like fun to see, like, and I myself like experienced the pressure when did it first, but with testers that when you put like the time, clock is ticking, you suddenly meet like 6 people like on this call. Suddenly, if you don't know anyone and you have a mission and something, and you need to take the role and learn things and everything, it's a high pressure situation that you can create even like virtually. And I've been surprised like how effective it is, even though it's like online and virtual, basically. So that kind of reminded me that these Apollo astronauts, some were even like a little bit disappointed when they went to the moon about the experience, because they had been so much in the Apollo sims on Earth, and they weren't also that fancy many times. They were like stripped in strings to like feel like kind of a like weightlessness in a way, or 1/6 of a gravity. But they felt that it's not so special. Like it's almost like a sim. Like because they had been so we kind of I think many times tend to think that we need to have all those high props and gadgets and physically be, but I would a little bit like say that there's a lot of things that we can do virtually and online, and I'm not talking virtually like virtual reality or that kind of a gadgetry again, but it comes into the details, the stories, how do you create the experience altogether.
Great. I guess we'll continue kind of on that topic, since it's come up a few times throughout this panel. Is what areas are you adapting during the pandemic with your programs, and have you run into difficulties when making that change? Anyone want to take that? Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I start. As I said, our mission had to be postponed, and also our training was swapped a little bit. So we started doing online trainings now for the last several weeks, and our live trainings are hopefully going to start up in the beginning of summer. And regarding online trainings, as you just said, Kalle, it's possible to do some aspects. We even had geology training online, doing mapping exercises, stuff like that. Of course, it's a good way to keep the team together and to, for example, practice communication, stuff like that. But you can tell that a little bit the team feeling is missing if you don't get to see each other in person. But we also just had an AMBT, meaning the Analog Mission Basic Training, online for the first time. And that worked out pretty well, I think. It was different, but different doesn't have to be bad. More people were able to join from places that would not have been able to travel to Innsbruck. So it can be a good thing as well, I think. And finding new ways for new situations is kind of our thing. So I think we are adapting as a community, and maybe we can use some of the things that we learn now for later when the pandemic is kind of over or we have a new normal. Maybe as an end note, our team, we said several times already that we are one of the best prepared teams ever for going into isolation, because everybody now knows what it feels like to be 4 weeks in a closed space with a few people. So yeah.
That's so interesting. JJ and Sai and I and our other crewmates were in the high seas habitat right before the pandemic started. So we were in just for a 2-week mission, but we got out, and then there was news about it happening, and then we went right into it. So it was kind of an interesting transition to do that right from, living in that type of isolation to the different kind. So that's excellent.
It's like nothing now. Hey, Andrew, Erin.
I know, it's like just normal life.
Right. I'll just add to this just a funny anecdote, because I know that some of my crewmates from Selene 1 are on here. But going back into high seas during the pandemic after having gone before, I was going to high seas for a little bit of a respite from the isolation of the pandemic. So it was interesting how space became an escape for me or the space habitat became an escape for me from the reality of the isolation of pandemic. So funny how space becomes the more interesting isolation space during these days.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, but what I'd like to do is give everyone a chance to say where people can learn more about your program and get involved, that kind of thing. I know we shared some emails in the chat, but it'd be nice for everyone to just kind of go around and, let people know where they can find you. So I'll start with Jason.
Oh, thanks, Erin. I was just going to quickly add to that topic about keeping people engaged during a pandemic. Myself and one of the other directors happened to be at a meeting in Russia. We ended up staying extra and getting trapped in Siberia, and ended up, instead of a couple of weeks, it turned out to be months. Learning a new language is a great way to spend the last year. So I have to say Russian's a lot better now. But extending from that, with our program, we found the opportunity to introduce 3 whole new tiers. And typically, our citizen science campaigns, our 103 and 104 courses, the 101s and the 102s are preparatory. So by introducing new opportunities, a lot of our members had opportunities to learn new skills and new trades and prepare for new campaigns. So what we have coming up here, we have 3 semesters in the year. We just finished our fall semester with 2 new courses, one on flight test engineering and one on fundamentals of underwater EVA operations. So it's a start to our NBL facility. In the summer, there are open university courses. Anyone can sign up for these. They're the 101s and 102s. If you go to astronauticsinstitute.org, there are some that are open to all, or you can apply to our Project PoSSUM Scientist Astronaut Qualification Program, and that'll be in September. And those will provide the foundations of experience for a number of our campaigns that involve more refined skills. So astronauticsinstitute.org, Project PoSSUM and Project Otter are our suborbital and our orbital research programs, respectively. That's projectpossum.org. And there are links to all of our outreach programs from there as well.
Great. And JJ?
Yeah, so we've got some exciting news. We're taking 2 teams to Linares this summer. So we'll be seeing Agata and Kolodziejczyk and the other Agata over at Linares in July and August. We're calling these our X-Team missions. These are meant to be for our leadership. We do have a few spaces available for those that would like to join us on this mission. I believe there's 1 space available for the first mission and maybe 2 for the second. We're currently doing confirmation. So do get in touch if you're interested in joining us for these X-Team special missions. And you can find us at sensoria.space.
Great. Anika?
Yeah, I posted the Austrian Space Forum's website on the chat, and that's basically where you can check out everything that we do. It's not only the missions, we also do a lot of outreach and education, and there's also always the chance to just work with us or do your master's degree, for example, with several projects, since we have cooperations with ESA, for example, and other agencies. There's a lot going on. Just check it out.
Great. And Agata?
Yes, of course. Also, I posted on chat. You can search for our trainings at www.astronaut.center. We offer mainly stratospheric missions, of course, analog simulations, rocket workshops, underwater EVA, so many things. But yes, it's a lot of stuff. And yeah, coming back to this COVID, I wanted to comment that now we had increased interest even, though in these analog simulations because of this isolation problem. Many people want to make research on it, and especially students, when they are in our place during the mission, they feel free finally, like they are in completely different world without COVID, without any restrictions and rules. Of course, we have our procedures, but they feel finally like students. They feel free. They are happy. They are dancing. And we are so happy with them that we can provide this in these weird times.
That's great. And Kalle?
Yeah, thanks. I also posted there the spaceport.spacenation.org, and that's our virtual spaceport, so to speak. You can join now free also to explore what there is, but there's also especially a universal citizen network where we have weekly events, live events also, and weekly challenges. And the spaceport is the place where we will have now the quest to save the ISS, but we'll have future missions and quests also happening. And we are probably getting back next year, not this year, for our physical on-site experiences. But before that, already launching also their third-party these experiences that take you physically also let's say almost to the space, to the edge of space.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Apologies to the questions that came in a little bit later in the panel, but hopefully our panelists will have a chance to jump in there on Vimeo and answer some of those questions afterwards. But I really appreciate you all taking the time to join us, tell us a little bit more about space training or space research opportunities within your organizations. And thank you to Jazz and Sai and Ron for pulling this all together. It's such an exciting opportunity, this international collaboration. It's just phenomenal. So thank you all so much for pulling this together. And at that, I think we call it a wrap.